forever. Republicans, Democrats, and independents are uniting against Trump. We must. The task before us until November 5th, 2024 and beyond is to save democracy. I'm Nicholas Snow. This is the Snowstorm on Sunday. Similar to your favorite political Sunday show on your favorite television network, the Snowstorm is taking on the hottest headlines of the day, but we go one step further. We take a position. We are unapologetically advocating to defeat Trump, prevent authoritarian rule, and save democracy. And that's what's happening. This is the Snowstorm. So on the show today, returning will be political powerhouse Joy Silver, an astounding friend, political activist, and she has actually just won her election for the Riverside County Democratic Party Central Committee, representing the 47th Assembly District. This is also Easter. Happy Easter for all who celebrate. And it is Transgender Day of Visibility. We'll have a note about that directly from President Joe Biden and future President Joe Biden. So that's what's coming up. PromoHomo.TV is all about empowering you, our communities, and our world. Shouting out to my media partners. Pink Media, amplifying PromoHomo.TV across the Twitterverse with their #ILoveGay campaign. GayDesertGuide.lgbt and KGay 1065 Palm Springs, available worldwide. Ask your smart speaker to play KGAY. Here's the deal, folks. We have two distinct choices. We can prepare ourselves to live under authoritarian rule, or we can do everything in our power to save democracy. And saving democracy is the precise reason I have launched the Snowstorm, your quintessential LGBTQ Sunday show at 9 a.m. Pacific. Find it at PromoHomo.TV. It is March 29th, 2024, Easter Sunday. We are live at 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you're watching on Facebook, however, this is not live. It's happening later in the day, and there's a reason for this. So if I broadcast into Facebook, Facebook ignores the video. But if I upload this a bit later today from within Facebook, Facebook will treat it as an organic internal live video and more people will see it. The message for you is if you want to see the show live and interact live, you got to go to the YouTube channel. And when you do and you have a question or a comment, I can feature it on the screen. Unless you're watching live on Instagram, I cannot do that. I also just want to briefly ask you, this is an all-volunteer program, including me. You can support it for as little as $3 a month. Become one of the PromoHomo.TV 1,000. When I have 1,000 people throughout the world that are supporting the network for at least $3 a month, I can expand my programming and actually make a little money doing this and work on it full-time. So that is the goal. Now, returning to the Snowstorm, I have to tell you, she was on an earlier incarnation of the show, Joy Silver. Now, Joy has over 40 years of hands-on experience in healthcare, affordable housing, senior living, community planning, and business and economic development. She's currently the Riverside County Party Democratic Chair, a founder of the activist group Courageous Resistance, Indivisible of the Desert, and the former vice president of Democratic Women of the Desert. She was the host of a radio show and podcast, Outspoken, with producer John McMullen, and additionally, she ran as the California State Party endorsed candidate for the state Senate in 2018, where the GOP candidate only won by 3%. And that is just a little bit about Joy Silver. and I'm going to bring her on screen right now. Good morning, Joy.
Morning, Nicholas. You're so kind in how you described me, and you're the amazing friend. So I just want to say astounding and amazing are certainly descriptor words I would use for you.
Oh, thank you. We're already starting with a mutual admiration society. It occurs to me, I don't really proclaim this, but I was one of the founding members of Courageous Resistance and used my media expertise to bring up excellent coverage to the first significant event at City Hall.
Yes, you did. And in fact, you certainly were we were launching through you, and we've been working on making change together for, I could say, for a good while now.
Well, and we will continue to do so. There's a whole variety of things we're going to talk about today. Democracy as an experiment, what dictatorship looks like, federal voting rights legislation, political messaging, propaganda, the controversy and challenges around all this, and how candidates come up with their platforms and strategic messaging. But first, Joy, it is Transgender Day of Visibility. There's already significant controversy because the right is trying to criticize our President Joe Biden because he has, as he does every year, has recognized a transgender day of visibility, and people are calling it blasphemy that he would do this on Easter. Well, the date of Easter changes every year. The date of transgender day of visibility does not. So there was no intention for Joe Biden to usurp Easter for the celebration. But I would like to share some of the words. You can't see it on the screen. It's too small, but I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs from President Joe Biden and the White House proclamation on the Transgender Day of Visibility. On Transgender Day of Visibility, we honor the extraordinary courage and contributions of transgender Americans and reaffirm our nation's commitment to forming a more perfect union where all people are created equal and treated equally throughout their lives. I am proud that my administration has stood for the justice from the start, working to ensure that the LGBTQI community QI plus community can live openly in safety with dignity and respect. I am proud to have appointed transgender leaders to my administration and to have ended the ban on transgender Americans serving openly in our military, which happened for the first time under President Obama, and then President Trump reversed that, folks. He reversed it. President Biden goes on to say, I'm proud to have signed historic executive orders that strengthen civil rights protections in housing, employment, healthcare, education, the justice system, and more. I'm proud to have signed the Respect for Marriage Act into law, ensuring that every American can marry the person they love. And Joy, that goes on. And for people that want to see more of that letter, I'm going to post a direct link in the comments right now. You'll be able to find it on whatever platform you're watching, unless you're watching on YouTube, because this won't show up there because that's a rebroadcast. So I guess, Joy, you're not surprised that the radical right in the Congress would decide to attack Joe Biden for honoring Transgender Day of Visibility on Transgender Day of Visibility, which happens to have fallen on Easter.
Well, there's a few things I want to say about that. I mean, just the mere idea that there would be anger and hatred against inclusion is already the issue. But there's a few things. Let's just look. And I am not one who celebrates Easter, but I will say that the point from the outsider's point of view, and that's the non-religious point of view, is that Easter has always been a message of hope. And so that hope and that inclusion and that understanding that miracles can happen and that we have to have faith, all of that is wrapped up, I think, in the message of Easter, and has always been historically, even before Easter was called Easter. So if this is the important message, it doesn't surprise me, however, that transgender and anger against the whole concept that of transgender people is just one more tool in the hatred against marginalized people, so that the far right can constantly gin up hatred. And feeding that hatred machine reminds me of putting coal into a steam engine, because there is no policy that protects any of the people who are angry. And since there is absolutely no vision to help any of the people, certainly not from the far right, and we'll get into who do they really serve, then the only thing that there's left is to keep anger. So it's okay. As long as you hate the same people we hate, we'll vote you into office. And so that is just one of the big tools of the, as you talked about earlier, the propaganda machine. Shovel that coal and keep the steam and anger going. Hatred is the earmark of the messaging of the MAGA Republicans.
Well, when you were on the show last, you talked about how they really want to divide us and have us fight with each other within our own coalitions. And there's the whole notion of wedge issues and how they are used, and the tradition of the right to put misinformation out to instill fear, to bring people out to vote based upon those fears and deceptions, and and also to get other people so discouraged about what's going on that they don't even go out and vote. The bottom line is democracy is still an experiment. It always will be an experiment until it isn't, and we're on that precipice right now.
Well, this is true. There's a couple things in what you just said that I also want to add a little more to, and that is, you are absolutely right. And I don't think that anybody who is really watching what's happening in this country today would dispute that the 2024 presidential election will determine the course of American democracy. And democracy is nothing less and nothing more than the conviction that together we build a better world than any one of us could design on our own. And you know, what's really amazing to me is they think, and I say they, meaning MAGA and those who ascribe to the hatreds and the culture wars, which, let's go into that a little bit. Does a culture war actually exist is even a question in my mind. They think we won't notice that it's really about freedom. Okay, so it's freedom of, it's freedom for, and it's freedom from. And those freedoms, to take away them from the greatest number of people, is really the concept. And if one person makes all the decisions moving to that, that's what creates the dictatorship. So I think all of that is absolutely true. I think the Democratic coalition, in its fractious form, is part of the issue. And what you said was, and in our former conversation, is that keeping us disunified creates the feeling of hopelessness.
You
But I
said
think,
that. I just was
well,
repeating what you said in our former
yes, well, you
conversation.
repeated that, and it is true, because if they can make us fight within ourselves, then this allows for the Republicans to unify, and Trump consolidates his hold
I
on
want to
that
just
on that
I want to
party.
make an important point, because there is this impression that this show is polarizing Democrats with Republicans. And I want to just remind people at the top of the show that I said that Democrats, Republicans, and independents are uniting against Trump to save democracy. That's why Governor Nikki Haley performed so well, because of people who are uniting to save democracy. So this isn't a polarity between Democrat and Republican. It's polarity with people who want democracy or who want dictatorship.
And that's absolutely true. It is true, however, that the consolidation in order to get to the dictatorship has taken over the far right extremist Republicans, which are MAGA Republicans. And I think we have to make that distinction. And that's a correct kind of view of it from my point of view. I think Nikki Haley has proven that there's a lot of unrest within the extremist party. But there's a lot of things that consolidates that power, and part of it is the threat of violence. And this is where I think we have the issue. I mean, recently, the former president, posted a picture of Joe Biden bound and gagged.
Whoopi Goldberg, by the way, says you know who. Not
I
that guy.
like
She
that.
says you know who.
You know who, right? The name that must not be mentioned, which even though we've already mentioned it, but yeah, I do kind of agree to that. But he has posted this, and anyone else who would do such a thing, indicating that kind of approval of violence, would be in jail by now. And in that way, we have really seen the articulation and visibility of more than a two-tiered system of justice, but but radically so. Anyone who has committed the kinds of crimes that we're watching, you know who, perform, definitely would be in prison by now. And I think that in many ways there is I would say it's a failing of our justice system to allow that continue and to not respond in a timely fashion, particularly after the insurrection.
I've picked up a stress ball on my desk and I find myself squeezing it vigorously as we're talking. And I don't ever do that. It happens to be a globe. It's a globe. It's the world. I've got the whole world in my hands. We have the whole world in our hands. And it was Maya Angelou who said, this is a paraphrase, but don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. And she's repeated all the time, but they are telling us, the radical right MAGA Republicans, not the Republicans that were my grandparents, not those Republicans that stood for completely different values, but they've told us what they're going to do and what dictatorship looks like. So, Joy, I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into that. And for those who are watching, this is what I want you to do, and this is what I'm pretty sure Joy wants you to do as well. This particular shirt is the crux of the Hopeful Sexual campaign, and it is designed to inspire authentic human connection while simultaneously combating sexuality-based shame and stigma. And the really cool thing is, if you go to hopefulsexual.com, it takes you to an Amazon store where this shirt is available in all sorts of styles, sizes, and colors. And I use the revenue to fund PromoHomo.TV. So check it out. I think almost everyone is a hopeful sexual, don't you? So, Joy, I remain a hopeful sexual, and this is the most complimented shirt I've ever worn.
I love it. Absolutely love it. It's a brilliant, brilliant campaign. I really do.
Thank you. So there's just so many horrible things out about what a day one of another presidency of you know who would look like. I would like for you, who really is following this very carefully, who knows truly what's at stake, to tell us what the United States under that dictator would look like.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the what are the items for dictatorship. So we have systemic efforts to intimidate the media, building official media networks of one person, politicizing the civil service, National Guard, or domestic security agencies. We know that having that kind of force and ability to command those forces is problematic. Using government surveillance against domestic political opponents, using state power to reward corporate backers and punish opponents, which I think is just incredible. Stacking the Supreme Court, enforcing the law for only one side, really rigging the system, fear-mongering, demonizing the oppression. And these are items from Stephen Walt from Foreign Policy. And Jennifer Dresden at Protect Democracy also had some items, 7 of them: spreading disinformation, politicizing independent institution, aggrandizing executive power, weakening the checks and balances, scapegoating vulnerable communities. This goes to the transgender backlash, so to speak. Quashing criticism or dissent, corrupting elections, and stoking violence. So these items, we are seeing that in the election, only one candidate is running on the platform of using unprecedented power to get things done. And I just want to talk a little bit about that, because what I often see, and it informs the messaging part of the conversation that we're rolling into. Many young people and many people in general think that things take too long to get things done. And so this becomes weaponized in the move to the insistence that a dictatorship could change that. It could change that. But why does democratic change take so long? And this is the most critical piece that we have to repeat over and over to those who are upset with the timelines of getting things done. Nothing ever changes. Things do change, but they take a hell of a lot more time when you have to hear from every voice that is affected by the change. Now, I'm going to just repeat that a little bit. If you have to have input and you want people to participate, if every voice is going to get heard, it takes time to hear all of the voices. First, you have to determine who all is all, okay? Then you have to have adequate representation from all of those groups. Then you have to have methodology to convene those sessions to be able to hear from all of those groups. Now you're talking about major timelines of input and listening and integrating into some bullet points of which things are priorities and what gets done and what fashion it gets done, and then who it's going to affect after it gets done. This is not a requirement of dictatorship. A dictator just says, this is what we're doing, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. And we see that the ambitions of you know who, even though he speaks of making America great again, which is not a new concept, and we'll talk about the historic Make America Great Again. Clearly, it begins and ends with him. There is no alignment to anything other than himself. And he doesn't have to do anything to retain the support of people who support him. His failures: didn't build the wall, never asked anything other of him than he triumphs over the forces that they hate in America. So the more hatred there is, the more that they are on board with what he thinks. Now, he's got a lot of avenues to persecute its enemies, both real and perceived, once in the power position. Federal government has enormous power for surveillance to possible links for terrorism that already exists. Who will stop improper investigations and prosecutions of his many enemies? There is no stopping it when he's in that position. It won't be a communist tyranny where everyone feels the oppression. It will be ordinary people of all kinds that will feel those limitations. But it's only a problem for them to the degree that you value your freedom, okay? And many people don't. They don't value it because they've never really not had it. I think that has dramatically changed with the Roe v. Wade, the dismantling of Roe v. Wade, which that guy claims credit for. And this has stoked an amazing machine of opposition, certainly from women. And I think it is unprecedented. You took away the freedom. What government takes away freedom? A dictatorship will take away many freedoms. And the success of that is that step, clear as day, that freedom is being taken away. And this is the lead to dictatorship. Who will stop him? His own handpicked military advisors? Seems unlikely. We know that many of the obstacles to dictatorships have already been cleared out. So there's only a few left to hold on to some kind of protection for democracy. It should have been, look, we didn't see the impeachment go through, okay?
Twice.
Two times. And that is one of the greatest obstacles towards dictatorship. But people in the party that supported him, those who supported him in the MAGA world, they were afraid for their physical safety and that of their families. And so we see that that is still going on at it, no matter gag orders or no gag orders. I go back to the Joe Biden posting of being bound and gagged. Anybody who would make such a threat would find themselves under not only surveillance, but would have been put in jail immediately, because it's a violent threat to the president of the United States. And yet he's still out there. So our inability to move swiftly is problematic.
What would separate that from political speech to being an actual threat?
Well, you're talking about somebody who has a lot of power. That's a threat right there.
No, I completely get it. I totally understand the spirit of it is, yes, this would be great, be more violent, try to overthrow the government on January 6th. I get it. But on a legal basis, do you think that that could be classified as a threat in a way that the person posting it could be arrested?
Well, we've certainly seen many presidents have had threats to their lives before. Supreme Court was crazy when they were even catcalled in front of their building. A real threat is somebody who has the power and the intention to do something violent against another person. And when
the bottom line is, regardless of whether or not they can be persecuted in the current legal environment of our country, we know it's a real threat, and we know that violence happens as the result of this man's words.
That's right. And so this is somebody in a very big power position, and we know that produces, this is the okay to go ahead and do exactly what's being told. I mean, long time ago, we used to hear about the First Amendment. You can't yell fire in a theater, right? This was like the old test. We are so far beyond fire in a theater. And I think somebody running in and screaming fire is one thing, but somebody who has the power and the position to inspire and has a history of, we saw poll workers in Georgia, we saw death threats to candidates that are out there. I mean, we see it to politicians. And let us take one step further. We saw what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband. I don't think there's anything. The trail is more than clear. The evidence is glaring, and I say this again, anyone else who would have done these similar things would be sitting in jail today. There's no doubt about it. So what created the space to engender this kind of anger? And this is where we get historical. Make
Joy
America.
Silver is schooling us today, folks. And I, for one, am happy to have a front seat to the lesson.
Thank you so much. Make America great is not a new statement. And, we can go back to Germany and see some of that too. But this started out with the Ku Klux Klan. And the Ku Klux Klan learned after the Civil War, they learned that in order to become more acceptable, at first they were stopped and when Reconstruction happened, but then they cloaked themselves in Christianity. And once they saw that helped them get their case over, Make America Great became part of their manifesto, their credo. So why would this happen in the beginning of the century? We saw after Reconstruction what was called Gilded Age, no regulations, unfettered capitalism. People got rich by basically taking all the public utilities, the trains, everything was taken over by what they used to call in the term robber barons, right? And so this became the Gilded Age. And then came regulations. And as regulations became to protect not just the country, but the massive robbing of the resources of America and American citizens, the final cherry on the cake for that particular population was FDR. And so we had the 1929 market crash. And then we saw that there were regulations put in. And ever since then, this is the America that they want to take us back to. It's not even necessarily the Civil War and the enslavement of people, because we saw enslavement of people at low wages anyway after that. But it's to that age where the freedom to rob and to make themselves rich, which we're seeing today. We have more billionaires than we've ever had in the history of the world right now. And if you're that rich, you cannot be satisfied. Greed cannot be satisfied. And I think that unfettered greed is at the root of the power that people want to have. They don't even care about money. After a certain point, you have so much money that it's then only about power. And that's where we are in our moment in time right now.
Wow. So I get that we could talk forever, but one of the things I'd like to do for the second half of the show is connect the environment we're in to action we can take. Uh,
Yes.
uh, I mean, clearly voting is one of them. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about the propaganda machines, and one element of dictatorship being that there's a whole world of media outlets that are propping up the potential dictator, is that there are people that you and I'm sure, I know and love, and their only source of information is Fox News and Newsmax, and some of them live in Arizona. And what do we, uh, I guess we all have to take our personal choices in terms of how we continue to engage with people we know and love, and that's our source of information. It's like, that's, I guess, a personal decision, but that's one of the things that's really sad to me. You know, both of my parents, that may they rest in peace, were watching Fox News nonstop, even after the same primetime lineup was on repeat. And I was not allowed to turn on CNN or MSNBC if I was visiting them. So, one of the things you and I talked about the last time you were on is that there really is no reaching some of these people. But there are ways of reaching many, many wonderful Republicans. There are ways of reaching them. Some of them are already very aware of who Trump really is and are fighting against him. That's just some of what's on my mind midpoint in our conversation.
We'll talk about some of those ways, because we have talked about the dictatorship. Now, how does democracy become the winner
All right,
in this
let's go
fray?
for it. This is the hope. Keep hope alive, folks. This is the hope. Take it away, joy.
And
You know,
so
they say on Easter there will be joy in the morning, and I'm
here
bringing
we
it.
are,
I'm bringing it. I'm bringing it.
bringing that to the screen right now. So let's just let's talk about the positive. You know, how does democracy become the winner against dictatorship? And I think that you have really underscored how many people are. There's something that goes beyond um, parties, and that social media platforms can be used not just to advocate for political beliefs, but also to attest to why democracy should be separate from politics, because it's a shared value among even among those who disagree. And so we have many, many forms and content that can be created through social media. So there is that. And I think what's interesting is John Bolton, who was one of that guy's uh, picks, he said that he didn't think that um, that he feels that the Constitution is clear and that there won't be another term. And he doesn't think that if that guy wasn't able to steal the election when he was in the Oval Office, he won't be able to do it. So he doesn't really think that this can happen. And that's important because he was very close to that guy and he knows him in a lot of ways. We can protect democracy just by talking about it. And I think what you said about Fox News is very important in that way. But it has also been established through studies that if you take Fox News watchers, and I'm not saying you're able to do this with your family because many people, they can't make that move, but those people who have watched Fox News, who are watching something like CNN, which is not a liberal bastion of media by any stretch of the imagination, still watching CNN for a period of time makes people distrust Fox News. And that is a major thing. And I think, and Fox News has the same viewership. It's not like it's expanding its viewership, okay? Because, and that's important because even in the rallies of that guy, he's not expanding his base. It's the same people who keep going to each concert. Reminds me of the Grateful Dead. They just had the same people who, it wasn't like new people were being introduced to these new tunes. It was the same group of people that were attending every concert. So he's not expanding his audience. And I think that really says something. In fact, his audience is growing smaller. It's becoming less inclusive. And that is also that is part of the Easter message. There is hope there. And
Well,
it's more,
now Lara Trump can start performing
yeah,
at the rallies right before the January 6th, as he says, hostages, sing the national anthem.
yeah. And I think having a warm up act is he had to identify that. But even so, and even with that, and even in the hopes that it would, there's two things. First of all, family members involved in this way. That's a whole different story. And second of all, the fact that he has found that he needs the warm up act. That's also, I think, a critical thing. So we're seeing some fear and some loss of power there. But does that make him more dangerous? And I think that's why we're going to see uglier responses. I mean, can it get uglier? It can always get uglier. It's amazing. Just when you think you've had the bottom of horribleness, there's always some other thing that can be said that seems even more horrible. But let's
Well,
move it.
he has mainstreamed ugliness in our culture.
He has given it permission. It has given it permission. But and so in the historical piece of this, and I had referred back to the Civil War. Remember now, most of what's happened here was the attack on seeing a Black president. And so the whole issue, even of this thing about Joe Biden is old. Now I'm jumping into messaging for a second. To say that Joe Biden is old, who is a fit person, and then to look at him, who is not 3 years younger, is not a big expanse of time. Plus, obviously not nearly as fit. Why is this
Well,
insistence?
according to his arrest, he's like 75 pounds lighter than he really is.
And there we go. However, what's the real problem? The real problem is, and Joe Biden stated it very clearly in his address to the nation, he was the vice president for a Black president, and he is the president with a female VP, woman of
Who's
color.
black? Yes.
And that is the real issue about why are they afraid that he's too old? So here's a person who has been, and he also named a Black woman to the Supreme Court. So we're seeing that the bottom line of this is the backlash to President Obama, which is unearthed the fear of Black people having power in this country. And what really is exciting to me is when I see all of these, Letitia James and and Fannie Will. I mean, imagine what that does to him to see these Black women with so much power, really. And it's a wonderful moment in our history when we're able to see that. And for me, this is extremely hopeful, because we're watching the wheels of justice being applied by those who were left out of the justice system for so many hundreds of years.
You're right. That is very helpful. That's very hopeful and exciting, and
it's incredibly exciting, because the truth be told is that there are more of us than there are of them. And this is always important. And who is them? Them is those that are only concerned with hate. And I think when you talk about independents and Republicans who also see freedom taken away, they also want stability. Look, business only thrives in a stable economy. And the economy is not a stable place when people are always ginned up and angry and when policies are eviscerating the economic growth for people, because then they can't buy products. So it's economic and it's also stabilization of our populations. So saving the democracy, and I'm not sure I like the term saving democracy. I think protecting democracy might be better, because we are to drift to the dictatorship is we've identified that we need to consistently identify that one person cannot make the decision for everyone, and that democracy is a messy process and a process that's important, and that it is important to hear from every voice in the democracy. And that's why I was taking the time to talk about why the wheels of progress seem slow. And I think when young people vote, and this becomes the protection of democracy, if voices need to be heard, they will need to come from those who are younger than we are, because this is the long term of the future of the country. And they can protect democracy, and they can make sure their voices are heard. And they're very astute, and they understand content, and we need to look for our leadership and our leaders in that population as well.
So tell me what the difference is between saving democracy and protecting it.
Because we haven't lost it.
That's right, because we have so far preserved it. But
And so,
if it, would you say it's on life support?
I think there's a threat to it. And I think when we're threatened, then we have to go to war against those tides that want to harm it. So defending, protecting, I like that language better. Saving seems like, we're going to save something because it's in a weakened condition. The condition is only weak when we've lost the freedom in totality. And we have the ability to vote. This is where I'm making the distinction.
Okay. So democracy is alive, and it's well, and it's thriving, and
that's why
it's only needs saving if we don't exercise it.
I would say that that's true, because we have the ability to exercise the democracy It's there. Votes are there. Votes haven't been taken away from us. We have actually expanded our ability to vote, in a certain sense, by having mail-in ballots, by having these cases, by having the Justice Department have the case in Georgia. We're still in that counter-offensive for democracy. And I think part of our issue is, and this goes again to messaging, instead of seeing the offense and defense, we have to look at offense and counter offense. We have to reclaim the narrative. That's why I say freedom for, freedom of.
Freedom from.
A freedom from. I saw a really great film about Shirley Chisholm.
It's on Netflix right now.
It is on Netflix. And
called Shirley.
It's called, and I was so inspired by her. And, in that time period, they talked about power to the people. And I think in our timeline, we need to say power to the people, all of the people.
Totally. Listen, in the last 10 minutes, I want to make sure that we can sort of rapid fire go through anything else you want to make sure is part of the conversation. And I know we've had consistent viewers throughout the episode. I can see the count on my screen about how many people are watching live. If you are watching live and have a question or comment for Joy or myself, I can curate it on screen. So just wanted to leave that opportunity for you as well. Go ahead, Joy.
So just to state some of the, and now I'm going into policy just a little bit. So the two things that we need to keep our eye on as we support candidates to represent us. Do they support the Federal Rights Voting Act legislation? That would be the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. These two are critical because these are the protection. These are the elements of making to strengthening our ability to vote. And so those two things become important. And then in a policy way, we have to start talking about taxes, because therein lies, from Reagan, who was the eviscerator, where we stand today has so much to do with what Reagan was able to accomplish. We're looking at payroll taxes that fund Medicare and Social Security. We're looking at the taxation of Social Security and unemployment. And rich people don't pay those taxes. So really making sure that the billionaires, I don't even want to say millionaires, but the billionaires, you start to pay their fair share of taxes, as much tax as poor and middle class people pay. All of those ills that we're concerned about right now would be we would have education. It was Reagan that stopped the college funding of universities and public school.
Also, I personally had Social Security survivors benefits because my father gave his life in the Air Force, and I could have carried those benefits throughout my college years, but Reagan eradicated them.
And there it is. And so the world as we know it today was the platform for it was there, including houselessness and building of, there's so much, the cutting of Glass-Steagall, the tens of thousands of Americans that are addicted to gambling because there are casinos everywhere, the great American brain drain, because when you cut taxes on the wealthy, you have less money to fund state universities, make racism great again, when the speech on states' rights, which is another term for racism. All of these things, the higher debt and deficit, voodoo economics with trickle-down policies. All of this has to be, that ship needs to be righted, and it's all sitting right there in taxes. So the two things that we want to make sure, and we should be asking candidates that are running for office, what are you for these? How will you fight for federal voting rights legislations? And what will you do about the tax, all things tax oriented, to write the percentage of what people pay for taxes. And we have to give that relief to the picking of the pockets of the poor and the middle class has just been outrageous. And we have allowed that to continue. And we need candidates and we need representation that puts that ship back on its right course. So those are some of the things. And then finally, how do we, let's get over the criticized messaging conversation really quickly too. Repeatedly, if I don't hear this one day, I hear it every single day. Democrats' messaging sucks. Just look, that's what people say. And I think to myself, you know, messaging is really a simple thing to do when the bottom line of all the messaging is white supremacy. Everything that means you are, you know, hate people who are, the privilege of being white is under every single message from the MAGA Republicans. So that's a really easy thing to message around. When you're talking about democratic messaging, you're talking about many, many, many issues, and all of them have to be included in there. So you have to ride for the brand and find that symbolic words that make it work. You have to rebrand it into the F words. And what are those F words? Freedom and fascism. Okay, those are the F words that have to be messaged. It has to be way less defensive and more counter-offensive. For example, MAGA Republicans have stripped American women of their freedom. Will they come for yours next? Taking credit, blaming, give blame, and name who's responsible for the different things that have happened in our society. For example, Democrats capped insulin at $35. American seniors no longer have to go hungry for the medicine they need to live. This is a credit. We have to own our issues, and we have to stick to a single villain, and we have to say it again and again and again. The simpler, the better. Contrast, contrast, contrast. Here's what we want. We want freedom. Here's what they want. They want fascism and a dictator. And that is the crux of it. That's why democracy, dictatorship. It's not about party any longer.
You know, one of the really important points that I think among many that you've made today is that, you know, Obama won and he served 2 terms and Biden was his vice president. Biden has been president and has had huge success in improving the lives of Americans. And his vice president is a woman of color. And people in the MAGA radical right, white supremacist wing of the Republican Party, the last thing that they want, they'd rather see hell freeze over, is to have a black female president who is actually young enough to go on and have the same impact as a President Obama.
That's right. That's right. And therein lies the fear of it. Look, this is not back in the day when people were enslaved. They would have a white foreman over the enslaved people who worked in the fields. And how did they get this person to they didn't have a wonderful life. They didn't have a lot of money, but they helped those who had money stay empowered and in the economy, because they gave that person power over other people. So they didn't really give them money, but they gave them power over. And what was the bottom line of why they were able to do it? Because they were white. So as long as you could identify those to hate, and you're not really concerned with what your everyday life looks like, then you are able to, as Johnson would say, pick the pocket of those people who were involved in that emotional reaction. I think we are now at the place where we have the opportunity to make that emotional case. We are at that moment where if we must vote, or we won't be able to vote again.
Hence, protect democracy. I use save democracy. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Well,
So, in the last 3 minutes, speak to our audience about inspiring them to step up.
you have the power, and it's important to know. Turn off the TV. That all of that news that you're watching, that is to create the message of hopelessness. But you will find, I'm going to give a quick story about me working in the field for a candidate. And this will identify and articulate what I'm sharing with this audience today. I'm in the field, I'm somewhere in Georgia, knocking on doors. And I'm looking at my list, and I see that half of the population in this neighborhood are Democrats and or left-leaning independents. And I knock on the door, and at this time, this was against the whole Trump situation. I knock on the door, and I don't see any lawn signs from anybody who's into freedom, the freedom that we're talking about. And I say, somebody comes to the door and they say, I'm so glad you're here. I really need to, I'm glad you're here, or somebody to talk to. And I look at them and say, I'm going to tell you a big secret. And she says, what? And I say, half your neighbors are Democrats or left-leaning independents. And she looks at me in shock. We don't know how many of us there are. Talk to the people around you. Talk about what's important. And don't worry about candidates. Worry about issues and worry about values. Because our representatives are only supposed to communicate the issues and values that we care about. So you're either for kid killers who are flooding the markets with assault weapons, or you're for the protection of life. And there are more of us than there are of them.
Well, also, one of the things I've learned is speak in a way that doesn't alienate people right away. And that is why I really am talking about good people from all walks of life, Republicans, Democrats, independents, even people who consider themselves to be apolitical, who want to protect democracy and stand up against the horror that is surrounding that man. And that man, I think that it's not a far leap to embrace the reality that some people call him the Antichrist, who is now selling Bibles, which you knew it was going to be the cold open of Saturday Night Live. You just knew that.
Right.
Well, I think I want you to come back, Joy, as often as you want. I think that I'm going to make you come back every month. I say make you as a joke. You're welcome whenever you want to come on this show.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do. And thank you to all who are listening. Let's get in this. We're in this together. Let's make it better for all of us, not just some of us.
Well, I just want to thank my viewers as well, because even though you were all very shy today, you've been watching consistently, and our viewer numbers have been increasing throughout the broadcast, which is great. I want to give another shout out to KGay 1065 Palm Springs. They are running 3 commercials a day about the Sunday show here, the Snowstorm on PromoHomo.TV. And thank you, Joy. There has been joy in the morning on Easter.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll see you next week.
In a safe place, I got room to breathe. Been a long chase, but at last I'm free. These open woods, I knew I could find peace here. Nothing like the city where I got tired of the running, the catching up. I got hungry for the stunning high mountain tops. So I made some plans. Get the rush